Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here. This is our relatively new tradition in the Whiting School, honoring our distinguished emeritus professors. So this is our Emeritus Professor Lecture Series, and it's meant to honor our faculty as they transition to the next phase of their careers. And of course, today we're here to recognize and honor Andrew Douglas, who is Executive Vice Dean of the Whiting School, an Emeritus Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. His research has focused on the nonlinear mechanics of compliant materials and the dynamic fracture of ductile metals. But although he has a very distinguished scholarly career, certainly as I have known Andrew, it's been through his very many leadership positions at the school and at the university as chair of the department, associate dean for academic affairs, interim dean, vice provost for faculty affairs, and he continues to take leadership in the school, currently principal investigator on an NSF, a $3 million NSF grant, along with NYU and Carnegie Mellon from the National Science Foundation, called Project Elevate, meant to help colleagues and universities design and implement strategies to help increase the number of faculty from groups that are historically underrepresented in engineering. But more important, again, personally for me, is Andrew's role as an amazing confidant, advisor, a person with whom I've shared many conversations, who's helped me tremendously navigate difficult issues in the school and at the university. I certainly would not be successful in many things I've tried to do were it not for Andrew's advice, his assistance, his calm nature, his striving always for excellence. He's been absolutely critical to the success of this school over the years that I've known him and that I've worked with him. He's had an impressive career, no doubt, but it is in that role that I personally have benefited from his being a member of our community. Today, I guess we're going to hear about his personal journey through the Whiting School, how much things have changed in the years that he's been here. But before we hear from Andrew, it's my pleasure to introduce Gretar Tryggvason, the Charles A. Miller Jr. Distinguished Professor and Head of the Department of Mechanical Engineering. Gretar.
So I'm going to stay away from the computer here. So it is a pleasure to introduce Ed Shinerman, who will introduce Andrew. He has been a professor of the Whiting School since 1984. He graduated with a PhD from Princeton that year. His undergraduate degree was actually from Brown University, and there are many of us Brownies here in the audience. He has served as a department chair of mathematical science. He has also played various roles in W.S. Dean's office. He's currently the Vice Dean for Faculty, but he is highly relevant to mechanical engineering, not just because he's followed Andrew in that position, but also because he spent a year on an internal leave of absence in the mechanical engineering department. He tells me he worked on robotics and flew on the Vomit Comet, okay, which I am sure was very inspiring for all his mathematical thoughts. Ed?
Thanks, Gretar. When Andrew asked me to introduce him, I had an immediate reaction of no. And for two reasons. One, it's an impossible task. Everybody already knows him. So, and then that made me actually relax, because if I mess something up, it doesn't matter. You already know Andrew Douglas. But there's another reason. When we conceived of these Emeritus Professorial lectures, this role that I'm standing in right now was reserved for a student of his. And I was going to say, no, Andrew, and I stopped myself. No, actually, if I think across my career, that's exactly what I've been here at Hopkins. I've been a student of Andrew Douglas. I have followed his career along the way, starting at Brown. All right, that doesn't count. We didn't know each other. He was a grad student, I was an undergraduate. But then, we were both assistant professors together. He was department chair in mechanical, follow which I was department chair in my department. He entered the dean's office, and then sometime later, when he became interim dean, with much gratitude, he brought me in as part of his leadership team. Thank you. We did our IPLs together the same year, and we took that midnight plane to Georgia, not Atlanta, Tbilisi, which we had a great time. So Andrew, I have followed in your footsteps. I just aspire someday maybe to fill those shoes that are so wonderful. And so with that, Andrew Douglas.
So is this working? You guys switched on? Okay. So thank you very much for coming. I will be honest and say that there are two things that ring in my ears a little bit. One is it's my youngest daughter's 30th birthday. And the reason why I say that is that she was born just before I got tenure. I remember being very anxious about having 4 children and not getting tenure. The other was that Don Giddens established the inaugural professorial lectures, and I gave the first inaugural professorial lecture in this room in 1994. And at the end of the lecture, somebody came up to me and very honestly said, "Bad talk, too many loops." And I knew exactly what he meant. There was just way too much technical stuff in there, and people didn't want to see that. So I've tried to dumb that down a bit this time. So I'll just say, being here has been unbelievably lucky for me. I mean, I've had such a good ride with such great people that it really is amazing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit differently. I'm going to use a lot of anecdote and really avoid data, which is what engineers shouldn't do. I'm going to give you a personal and biased view. There are some places that do that, and so I will do that. And then there are way too many people to thank for such a great ride here, and I'm just not going to be able to do nearly as much. But I am going to give you some references. So I did go back and look at Mary Ruth Yo's book, written in 1989, about the Whiting School of Engineering. Then there was A Century of Innovation, edited by Sue Visquile in 2012. Katrina Parsons gave me lots and lots of data, which I put together, and then I realized I couldn't use nearly all of it because that would be way too boring and too long. And then I actually went and read the JHU Board of Trustee minutes. Some of them are handwritten, and you can go and do that yourself, and you can see that, right? Anyway, I'll just say that the role of luck for me, somehow it happened, and there is theory about how luck works. Sir Alessandro Pulcino and a bunch of Italians got the Ig Nobel Prize in 2022 for their study on luck. And so there's really serious math behind this. And I'll just say that success is a Pareto distribution, talent is a normal distribution, and since the two are not equal, luck has got to play a factor. But that's where they are. But you know, the most talented people hardly ever reach the top. I'm not so sure about that, because I know some extremely talented people in mechanical engineering, particularly, who reached the top. I don't know that I surpassed anyone, but I certainly was one of the people who got very lucky. So let me just talk about the School of Engineering, when the culture here before I arrived. And you guys know that the university started in 1876, and Gilman actually envisaged that there would be something like engineering here. And in fact, way back in 1887, when electricity was the hot topic of the day, it gave a certificate in electricity. And in fact, old Henry Rowland, for you know, the ruling engine Nobel Prize winning, he was actually an engineer, but he got the Physics Nobel Prize. So that's something to aspire to, get a Physics Nobel Prize as an engineer. But 1912 is when things really kicked off, where the state of Maryland passed this technical school bill, And then we established the first BS degree. 1922, first doctorate of engineering. And so how did we get to establish engineering? By we, I mean Hopkins, and I was not here in 1890, although most people think I was. So engineering was pretty small in those days, and Cornell was the first to give a PhD in engineering. If anybody's from the budget office, please tell Chad what it cost to build Maryland Hall, 24 cents a square foot. So at the time, tuition was $150 a year. Now you think about that, Maryland provided $600,000. Think about that state impact. So it was great. Started engineering with 3 faculty members. What I want to point out here actually is the way in which this was an engineering science school with a very strong connection in those days to philosophy. So 40% of it was basic science, 35% of it was professional engineering, and then about 25% was language and philosophy. Typically, other engineering schools majority were engineering. And by engineering, they were sort of like cookbook courses, right? It was heuristic, it wasn't science-based. And the power plant that stands down there somewhere was the lab. Anyway, there were 2 big impacts on engineering, as far as I can tell, throughout its history before the Whiting School came. One was the impact of World War I, and in fact, many of the buildings here were turned into barracks. Soldiers in the barracks, there were people lining up like I did as a soldier on the upper quad and marching around and all that kind of stuff. And some of the research was, in fact, most of the research was pushed over into helping the war effort. A particular one is submarine detection. So my fluid mechanics friends, they predate you. But at the end of the war, the Mann report from the Carnegie Foundation came out and said, we really need engineering schools to provide real practical engineering education, co-op experiences and so on. And engineering here at Hopkins just said flat out, no. We are going to be different, and we're going to keep an engineering science approach. So that was one of the first bifurcations that engineering here had from other places. There was a second impact, which was World War II, where night courses were set up, short courses were set up, undergraduate enrollment dropped from 400 to 100. It nearly bankrupted the school, but the good thing was that women were admitted. So that was a good thing. And they were admitted both to the Bachelor of Engineering program and to the graduate engineering programs. Now, the trouble is that after the war ended, then the women were only allowed to keep in the graduate programs and were not admitted back into the undergraduate program. Anyway, in 1946, there was a strong recognition that science had made a huge difference to the war effort. And there were some amazing things that came out, the atomic bomb, jet engine, radar, all that kind of stuff. And so there was another return to the engineering science approach. And the engineering science approach, which was very strongly adopted here and Yale and a few other places, led to the merger in 1966 of the Faculty of Engineering with the Faculty of Philosophy to make the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And it was done without much fanfare. I mean, it's hard, it's just like it was done. I don't think it's every minuted even in the trustee minutes and so on. We had an Engineering Science Advisory Council, which ceased to exist. The Homewood Academic Council was formed. It had 12 members, 2 of whom were engineers, and they eliminated chemical engineering. Essentially, the merger also almost eliminated engineering. The number of undergraduate engineers dropped tremendously, and the number of engineering faculty members just kept going down, because as an engineering faculty member left, they were replaced by someone other than engineering. So it was an interesting low point for engineering here. But in 1977, Hackerman led a commission that recommended that engineering be restarted here. And the Whiting Estate provided $3 million. So if you think about establishing a school for $3 million, that's not very much. And there were plans for 50 faculty members, of whom 40-something were already at the school. And there were a few departments here. Electrical engineering was here, geography and environmental engineering was here, mathematical sciences was here, and then there was this mechanics and material sciences here as well. Now, over in the School of Medicine was the biomedical engineering department, which became a department in the School of Medicine in 1970. So that's where we started. And it took a little while for me to arrive, and I arrived in 1983, and there were 40 professors. Steve Hankey is still a professor here. He arrived in 1969, and he's still a full professor. Grace Brush was a full professor, and she was the only woman full-time faculty member, and there was no faculty member of color. There were 4 associate professors. Howard Wynant was an associate professor. He's still here. And then there were 16 assistant professors. Dan Naiman, who joined in '82, Alan Stone joined same year, and I joined in '83. And of those 16, 5 made tenure. So if you guys think that the standards were high, yeah, they were appropriately high. But I got lucky I did it. Just to give you the background on this, the Krieger School, there were 190 professors. The Bloomberg School of Public Health was only 80 professors. And you think about how the Bloomberg School has grown since then. And the School of Medicine had 300 professors. The arrangement of the School of Medicine at that time was a little different than now, because they had a whole lot of clinical people, but these were the sort of core medicine faculty members. And I'm counting professors just because that's an easy way to count. And it also tries to preserve some integrity with sort of, if you count professors in each of the places, then there's some relative piece to it. Anyway, so that's the school that I joined, and I had an absolute ball here. So I'll just mention some things about teaching. Oh, and by the way, I don't mind anyone interrupting me if you think that I didn't do something, or you just want to have a clarification. So I'll just say that teaching for me was more about learning, because I seemed to learn more than I taught. And one of the people who taught me a lot was Kate Stebby. She taught me linear algebra and differential equations while I taught the students. And she's now at the University of Pennsylvania. Bill Hunter, who moved to Rutgers, the late Bill Hunter, I'm afraid, we put together a course on the mechanics of living tissue. And that was fantastic for me because he just taught me so much about bio stuff, and we got a great time teaching biomechanics. And the department was really good because they let me do this stuff, which is actually teaching for another department. But that was great about Hopkins. If there was a strong intellectual rationale, then we weren't bound by some strange rules. And then I can't say enough about Kevin Hemke and Katie Ramesh. You guys did try and teach me a lot. I know I struggled to keep up with you, but we did at one time an integration of the mechanics of solids, continuum mechanics, material science curriculum. So that was a great deal of fun. But that was the formal teaching. But I will also say that one of the things that's important about teaching is that I taught outside my discipline a little bit. The last time I did that was, that was dangerous. That was Vicky Nguyen having her 3rd child. I covered for her and teaching design. Anyway, that was an experience for the undergraduates. As far as research is concerned, I also had an absolute terrific ball with things. I will mention Bill Hunter. We did some cardiac mechanics together, and how that happened was classic Hopkins, right? So I'm sitting in my office in Latrobe Hall 106, or 105, I think it was. And the student knocks on my door and says, I'm studying oxygen transport in the lung. And I'm a steel guy, right? So I'm doing ductile steels, HY100s in ships and all that kind of stuff, and nuclear pressure vessels. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, but you do. And he told me what he was trying to study, right? And he had these little radiopaque beads in the lung, not of a human, but in a lung. And he'd take biplanar cine X-rays of these and watch the volume change. He says, you know how to calculate the volume change. I said, yeah, that's just like a continuum mechanics homework, right? Here it is, go. And he went away and did his own thing, and I don't know what happened to that research. But a few weeks later, someone else came and said, I'm putting radiopaque beads in a heart and watching the movement of those radiopaque beads in the heart. That happened to be one of Bill Hunter's students. And so from the lung to the heart, suddenly I got involved in bio stuff, and that was a really great trip. KG Ramesh and I did some nonlinear mechanics together. He even got me close to being a lab guy. I mean, we had a biaxial stuff. He didn't know what he was in for, because I'm pretty klutzy in the lab. So when I was a high school student, I reached to a beaker and decided to take a sip of it. It turned out to be paraffin, and that was a good lesson not to drink something in the lab, right? I mean, talk about safety 101. Steve Morrow did active materials with us. I had a wonderful collaboration with Maureen Stone. I wish I could have been more active because I was getting involved in university leadership while we were doing it. Pedro Ponte Castaneda, who's now at Penn, and I did some work on composite materials. And although I never published with Reza Malik Madani, I would run all my math by him, and he really helped me out quite a lot with particularly perturbation theory on differential equations and so on. So that was, I mean, I'm going to back off this stuff a little bit because I want to talk about something that Ed talked a little bit about, which is academic leadership and how that's been, because it really has been a fun opportunity for me. So I'm made full professor in what, 94, I suppose, and so it was not too long after that that I was invited to serve on the Homewood Academic Council, and that was a really good experience because I learned about the university, about humanities and about social sciences, and when I read the letters for the humanities recommendations for tenure, I improved my vocabulary because those people really do use English, right? So you've got these notes in the side as to what all these words that they use mean. So that was great. And then I was trying to mind my own business and keep going as a professor, which Bill Sharp always said, and I think he's right, is the best job in the university. When Dean Don Giddens asked me to be chair of mechanical engineering. And so I said, oh, okay, I've got to be chair of mechanical engineering. Well, that was an interesting start, right? So the first few weeks of mechanical engineering, we had a drug bust and we had an embezzlement case. So I can tell you that in grad school, they don't tell you how to deal with a drug bust and they don't tell you how to deal with embezzlement. So this was an interesting way to become chair of mechanical engineering. So the last year of Don Giddens' term, I was chair, and the first year of Ilene Busch-Vishniac's term, I was chair, and then she asked me to join her in the dean's office, which I did. When she stepped down, Provost Steve Knapp asked me to serve as interim dean for a year, which I did, and that was between Ilene Busch-Vishniac and Nick Jones, who came after Ilene and after a year. And then I served as vice dean for faculty under both Nick and now Ed Schlesinger. And I served as interim dean again, this time being asked by Sunil Kumar. And then I served under Sunil Kumar as vice provost for faculty affairs. And there I did three things which I really believe in. One is to make sure that the faculty had strong voice in the way in which we responded to the pandemic. And the pandemic was quite stressful in the provost's office. The other thing is to really give faculty a voice at the university at the highest level. And so what we established to deal with the pandemic, which is the University Pandemic Academic Advisory Committee, came the Johns Hopkins University Council, which I'm very pleased to say is essentially a Senate of Senates. And so the faculty have a voice at that level. And then the other thing that I think is important, and this is to do once again with faculty governance, is the establishment of the Tenure Advisory Committee. So here are people who've served in the tenure bodies in each of the schools that award tenure, now serve at the highest level and make decisions. And I think that that's and I'll come back to this theme. And then after being vice provost for 3 years, I said, I'm done. I can't do anymore. But Ed Schlesinger this time persuaded me to hang around a bit. And so I'm hanging around working for him as an at-will employee. But you know, that's kind of good. Now I want to talk a little bit about how did this happen that the engineering school became such a great place and such fun. I mean, it really is. You look at this, right? That's the number of tenure line faculty members. I haven't got all the data. Katrina, you can see I cherry-picked from your data, but I mean, just look at what's happening. I mean, we're just doing absolutely wonderfully. And I will say, let's look at our peers, right? Who else could do this? And I will say that in terms of faculty growth, only CMU and Columbia have grown more than we have. And in terms of research growth, only Duke has grown more than we have over the period from 1993 to 2021. So that's actually quite a big span. And Duke in 1993 in engineering was really kind of small. So you can grow more from a low base than from a higher base. And you'll see obviously the big schools, MIT, Cornell, struggle with growth. I mean, you can see MIT not growing very much by design, right? And you can say, well, you know, this research growth, is that to do with just growing the faculty? And I'll say that if you take the research growth and divide by the faculty growth, we are second only to Duke. I mean, we've really done extremely well. And now anybody who knows me will know that the colors on the bars have got to mean something, right? So red is us, so just make it easy for you to see. The blues are the places that I think moved heavily into biomedical engineering. And so Cornell does have biomedical engineering, but I don't think it's as strong as the other departments. It's not as bio as others. Princeton, Stanford, CMU, MIT, they're coming into the BME game, but they're a bit late. So on the whole spectrum of 93 to 2021, they're a bit late. And I think what happened was the schools with strong bio programs, either biomedical engineering or like Pablo right here, I mean, you do bio stuff, right? So you tap into NIH like I did. I worked with Bill Hunter and R01s and so on. They tapped into a new source of funding, which was the NIH. So that's my thesis. And always, money is just a facilitator. The real key issue is how are you doing with impact? And one impact that I can get, it's a little more difficult for us to get other impacts, is how did you do in the rankings? So MIT and Stanford are 1 and 2. They didn't change over that period of time. CMU has come up in the rankings. Caltech, essentially the same. Cornell dropped a little bit. Columbia stormed into the rankings. They were not in the top 30 in 1992, but now they are quite highly ranked. I worry a little bit about their data because they, anyway, so that we'll let them, we'll see how they do later on. USC has come up, look at Hopkins, the red there. I mean, we have come up extremely well. Northwestern hasn't kept pace. Now, Northwestern is an interesting school because my academic grandfather went there, and I've always thought that that's the school we want to overtake. We finally have. I mean, it's really amazing. So how did we do that? Besides the fact that the faculty are just damn good, I'll go over some things. Penn jumped onto the scene. Princeton's not keeping its ranking. Harvard has actually established an engineering school, which is quite surprising. RPI and Rice have dropped off the top 30. So now the question is, how did we do this? And is there something that the academic leadership can do? So I went and looked at the archives, and David Vanderlinde, who is dean here from the start until 92, what the archives tell you is he built the right departments, he hired excellent faculty, he secured ABET accreditation. Then we had Don Giddens, and he strengthened incentive systems. He developed leadership skills in the faculty. These were faculty retreats where he'd get feedback from the faculty, so I like that about things. What was written about Ilene Busch-Vishniac was that she held faculty members accountable. And then if you look in the archives, Nick Jones established Fast Forward and expanded collaborative enterprises, centers, and institutes. So that's what the official people say. So I'm going to give you my opinion now. So first, David Vanderland took over a school and just started to get it on the ground. But in 1989, the university realized that it was in a financial mess. Actually, the School of Arts and Sciences was in a financial mess. So Arts and Sciences was running a $5.5 million budget deficit, which was 13% at the time. I don't know who the finance people are here, but you can sort of tell me what a reasonable deficit is for a short period of time. But over 1% starts to get worrying, over 4% gets difficult, over 10%, and it's really hard. So not only was it 5.5 million, but it was projected over 5 years to almost double to 9 million. And so what the university did was they established a university reserve fund, commonly called the IRF. And medicine did make the largest contribution, $20 million, to deal with that deficit. And that was 12% of medicine's revenues in fiscal '89. And that was spread over 5 years. What the Whiting School was hit with was a 3.9 million. That was 21% of our FY '89 revenue. And as Murray Sachs so eloquently said, malnutrition is particularly severe on the young. So this was a really hard time for the engineering school. The brakes got put on. And it was really difficult to get through. The other schools came up with 3.1 million, even though the School of Public Health was actually quite a bit bigger than we were at the time. So what David Vanderland did, I think, was very effective. He made sure that our EP program was strong, and then he did something which I think looked to the future, which is he split the EE and CS department into ECE and CS. And the reason why I say that that's important is that computer sciences turns out to be a really key driver for technology today. He did have a tuition-based departmental funding model. I can go into the details of that. It had a non-zero offset and all sorts of things. It was complicated, but it was an incentive model for funding departments, which started the school, I think, building in that the departments understood how to generate revenue, because we really had to generate revenue. We were in difficult times. Don Giddens came in, and for the first time, we had this chain that was on our ankle removed, and he grew the faculty. He strengthened links to the School of Medicine and laid the foundations for Clark Hall and the Whitaker Gift. And I actually think the Whitaker Gift is important because, for those of you who remember, the Whitaker Foundation came into being, and it says, they said they were going to spend all their money over a certain period of time, and certain schools got these Whitaker Gifts, and then they would disappear. So they got the BME faculty members used to a large amount of funding, and then when the Whitaker went away, the BME faculty members said, we got to go somewhere else, and they did, and successfully so. And so I think that the accelerator piece of the Whitaker Gift worked well. And I'm only going to mention on slides one person just to remind myself, and that is, he did hire Russ Taylor, and he generated the first ERC, and that's a precursor to some of the important stuff that went on. I'm going to say some very positive things about Ilene Busch-Vishniac because too many people forget the positive things. One is she certainly strengthened the incentive reward system, and that was important. She did invest in computer science, in particular in information security. She got Doggy to offer an undergraduate program, and I think that Doggy's undergraduate program has been of benefit to the school. And she revised the departmental funding model. So once again, you'll see this idea that there's an incentive built into this. Nick was here last week on campus, and I went to Nick and I said, Nick, what did you do to make the school better? And I was totally unhappy with his answer, right? I mean, he told me, Well, we competed in non-traditional areas. Yes, I can understand that. And we built collaborative enterprises, and we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. And I was like, I don't think that that's really what made the time under Nick Jones work well. So I will say a couple of things that I think he did that were really good. First of all, he focused on quality, and we had a Bachelor of Science program in the EP, and that was eliminated in 2004. It wasn't Nick who did that. Actually, I did that, but he allowed me to do that. So, and then we did strengthen the incentive systems for faculty, including the centers. I will have one criticism of Nick. I think he underinvested in computer science and in ECE. I think those are two fundamental disciplines that every engineering school needs to have and have very strongly. If you look at the ranking of engineering schools, they correlate most strongly with the ranking in ECE. There's no question about that. It's just, look, mechanical is big, and that's my home, and we dominate, we graduate more, and Greta will give you the numbers, right? But you also got to have strong ECE and strong computer science. And it's wonderful to have computer science and applied math in the Whiting School. That's a big advantage we have. One of the things that Nick did that was fabulous for us is he used to have early morning. I mean, you talk about medical people, early morning, right? I mean, they're doing grand rounds at 7 o'clock in the morning with Ed Miller, the Dean of the School of Medicine. The other thing he did was he did fight for the Whiting School. One of the things that I think Nick did that is most important are these two things, and I can't say enough about it. One is he changed the budget office from bean counters to strategic planners. And Jim Ormiller deserves a tremendous amount of credit for that. The fact that they will essentially look at the different options and speak to the leadership about what the implications of decisions are is enormously helpful for the Whiting School. And the other is the staff is fabulous. And Nick had a real focus on really high quality staff. And I mean, Ed, you remember the changeover in your staff when you were chair, right? I mean, that was getting really good people has been fabulously important for the Whiting School. I can't say enough about the staff that we have and how much fun it is to work with the staff. So those things I think Nick has done. I'm not going to say anything about Ed Schlesinger because he's still here, right? So what do I think are the key drivers of success for the Whiting School? One is that we sit in a decentralized university, and that allows us to do a few things that are really important. One is we've got faculty autonomy. So the faculty in the Whiting School can do things unencumbered by other things. Now, we've got links to the Krieger School, which we have to worry about a little bit, and I'll talk a bit about that. We also have a school-based financial model where the school gets all the money and then pays taxes to central and that kind of stuff, which is much better than asking the provost for money. As Ed pointed out, we are working with CMU and NYU on this diversity grant. And when I talk to the NYU people, every time they want to do something, they have to ask the provost. I mean, really, engineers don't want to have to ask mom to do something. They want to build it, it's just, let's go. So that formally in university lexicon is called an RCM model, a responsibility-centered management system. So that helps us a lot. And we've got an independent faculty compensation structure. That's enormous. It's enabled us to keep some really stellar people because we can do things that we think are important for the school. So that's been helpful. I can't say enough about fundraising. It is fantastic that we have a fundraising team the way we have. And the way in which it reports which is both to central and to the school, has enabled them to do things well. And I will just say that team has been a wonderful team, and I've learned a lot from that team. EP is an absolutely, I was going to put like 20 slides on EP because I can't say enough about it, but I don't want to talk for too long. So I'm just going to say EP is an unbelievable asset for the Whiting School of Engineering. And it started way back with David Vandlin, when he realized that I need that EP to work well for us if we're going to survive the tax on the earth tax, if you call it. The other drivers for success are departmental driven focus on quality. So if the departments are not focused on quality, we're not going to get anywhere. And that departmental focus on quality is fantastic. And I can't say enough about my mechanical engineering colleagues because they all know exactly how important this is. And if you just look at what they are doing in terms of attracting faculty, mentoring faculty, and letting faculty succeed, but then, you know, doing all sorts of things on the undergraduate program and so on. I think the last time they said to the junior faculty, you guys know the students best, you take the curriculum and tell us what to do. I mean, that focus on quality and giving people autonomy and responsibility is great. We're very good at faculty collaborations here. We do an extremely good job. You know, I've known a few people who've gone over to Stanford and looked at how they do things, and Stanford's medical school and engineering school are fabulous. I mean, they're absolutely wonderful, but they don't work as well as we do here. And the collaboration we have with medicine, the collaboration we have with the School of Public Health, the collaborations we have on a faculty level with Krieger School, I think are really important. And we've also have an appetite for being flexible. So I'm pulling something out of the Homewood Academic Council Faculty Responsibilities Manual, which is faculty are required to contribute in substantial ways. And the way in which you do that and our flexibility in recognizing how faculty do that, I think is very important. So we are now no longer a boutique school of engineering. We are relative to all schools of engineering, and there are about 350 of them around the country. We're in the top 15 in research expenditures. We're in top 20 in terms of faculty size, and we are top 25 in PhDs graduated. So we are up there with some of the strong ones. When you look at private schools, we are 5th in research expenditures, 4th in faculty size, and 8th in PhDs awarded. So we are really no longer the little boutique school of engineering, and we have to grow up to, you know, that way. So let me think about some of the challenges that the Whiting School has. One is internal to the university. How do we play a role as a school? And I thought that the School of Engineering would have grown more than any of the other schools. We haven't. We're still 7% of the university. The red is Whiting. And Krieger's shrunk a little bit. Clinical revenue from the School of Medicine has shrunk a little bit. They're about the same size in terms of research revenue. The other schools are all 1%. The big change has really been the Bloomberg School of Public Health. It's gone from 10% of the university to 15%. So the Bloomberg School of Public Health, in terms of nominal dollars, so just not real adjusted for inflation, but just nominal dollars, they've grown by a factor of 22. Nursing, Whiting have grown by a factor of 17. Medicine by a factor of 14. The clinical revenue by a factor of 13, and Krieger by a factor of 9. So I'd like to see the red grow, but I think we need some respect. So how would we do that? I think that we are poised to provide intellectual leadership in engineering and technology, which is very important these days. AIX, environment, data science, computation, all of those, the university needs us, and they're very broad categories in there. So I'm thinking very broadly about that. I think that the Whiting School needs to provide leadership in faculty governance. I believe we have a strong Whiting School Senate. I'm very proud of the fact that we have a strong Whiting School Senate. I do think we should have our own independent promotions body. We are the only school in the cluster of Hopkins that has a minority of our faculty voting on our faculty. So every other school You know, if you're at SAIS, people vote on you. If you're in Krieger, majority of the people voting on you are Krieger. If you're in medicine, only medicine people vote on you. If you're in public health, only public health. We are not near that. Yeah. I do think we need to provide leadership in both the governance, in this governance of the school and of departments. And that means that we strongly incentivize excellence. The departments have their own independent, faculty-driven strategic plans, and there is a rigorous financial discipline. I think that the school is in that position, and that's where we need to show that we can do that. And then the other piece is we are doing exceptionally well in building community and focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those are things that I think we have as challenges to be placed well as a school within the Hopkins cluster. As an engineering school, we now have got some really serious challenges with us. So we need to decide which intellectual discipline we need to be leaders, right? And I really mean leaders. So this is a hard task for departments because you cannot, even at the scale that we're at now, which is far more than we used to be, we have to pick and choose and really be careful about that. We need an absolutely ironclad departmental commitment to excellence. So my dream is that there's no question that the hardest hurdle any faculty member has in terms of getting promoted is within the department. The departments are really the people who know the faculty best, who know the field the best, and if they vote for someone, then that person should sail through everything. And when they get to the TAC, people are going to say, wow, this is the engineering school again. I do think we are now big enough to provide leadership at the national level. I know people like Kevin Hemke and some other people have done that, and it's unbelievably important for the school. So I think we need to do that. We need to provide nationally recognized leadership in community diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that NSF grant is one way to do that. But I do think that we should be known as a place. And yes, we're being helped by the Vivian Thomas Scholars Program and some of the other programs, but that's something which I think will help us. And then I think the faculty do this when they just do their scholarship. We need to inspire our alumni and friends because then the development team can go. So I've got a little bit preachy here, but I'll just say this has been an incredible place for me. And I just want to say thank you to all the people because it has been the people that has made this such a good ride. So with that, thank you to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your insights. So you can see why Andrew is such an incredible asset to me as dean when we start thinking strategically and understanding the history and more. And now that Andrew is emeritus, and so he's working part-time, I'm able to say to him what I used to say to my graduate students, there's 168 hours in a 7-day week. So if you're working 80 for me, that's part-time. That's not full-time. So, but with all seriously, Andrew is a huge asset for us, and so it's wonderful to be able to recognize him in this way. And I want to a little memento of becoming an emeritus professor.
Oh, thank you very much. Ed.
Congratulations.
Great. Thank you.
And I invite you all to join us for refreshments. Thank you all.
And thank you to all of you. No, thank you very much.